Hello, this is Rashad Mitchell, and welcome to the Rashad Mitchell Show for February 23rd, 2016. I am your host, Rashad Mitchell, and I'm going to be talking about the NBA recap. There wasn't that many games played last night, but there were 5 games played last night. And I will look at the book that I've been reviewing all, the past week, looking back at the top 60 NFL players of the past 60 years. Steve Silverman wrote this book, and I wanted to take a look at that. But first, we're going to look at the recap of the NBA last night. First and foremost, the Orlando Magic beat the 76ers 124-115. Vucevic scored 35 points last night. A guy who's drafted 16th. Oh, goodness. Due to what happened last night with Vucevic, it was a big game. 35 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists as they won 124-115. Victor Oladipo had 22 points. Evan Fournier had 21 points. Aaron Gordon chipped in with 11 points and 11 rebounds. The Magic won a big game for themselves. I don't think they're in the playoff race, but they was able to get things done and win against the Sixers team, obviously the worst team in the league, who's 8-48 on the season, 124-115. The Sixers just are playing terrible defense. In the last 4 losses, they have allowed an average of 122 points. So, big win for Orlando. Next, in the NBA from last night, the New Orleans Pelicans traveled to Washington to play the Washington Wizards, where the Washington Wizards absolutely embarrassed the Pelicans 109-89. John Wall got a triple-double, 16 points, 12 rebounds, 11 assists. Anthony Davis was a guy who had a big game last week. This past Sunday, had 59 points and 20 rebounds. But he was held in check this time. He did grab 20 rebounds last night, but he only had 9 points, shooting 3 for 9 from the field. But kudos to the Wizards, man. They won last night. They played great defense last night. They held Davis in check after he had a big game on Sunday. Triple-double by John Wall. Marcin Gortat had 21 points and 11 rebounds. And they won their 4th straight home win at home. They won their 4th straight home game at home. So a big game that was done by the Washington Wizards. Jared Dudley had 18 points on 6 3-pointers. And a good all-around win for the Washington Wizards. The biggest lead of this game for Washington was 23 points. And they was able to hold on and make it happen and win by 20 points. So that's impressive, man. When you have an Anthony Davis, who is a guy that's going to be a top 3 player in years to come, he had 59 points on Sunday, and he only had 9 points. Now, he didn't shoot the ball that many times. He only shot the ball 9 times. Only made 3, but great job by John Wall and the Wizards, 109-89. Next, Sacramento played Denver, and Sacramento won 114-110. The game was played at Denver as DeMarcus Cousins came up big once again. And this guy knows one of the best big men in the game. You make a case he is the best big man in the game because he has soft hands around the rim and he's deceptively quick. He's deceptively quick in the open floor. He had a big part in this come from behind win. Sacramento biggest lead of the game was at 17 points. but they blew the lead, but they was able to hold on and get the job done. First and foremost, DeMarcus Cousins had 39 points, including a go-ahead free throws with 48.3 seconds left. The All-Star center came up huge down the stretch, scoring 8 of the final 13 points for the Kings, who blew a 17-point lead in the second half before rallying at the finish. Cousins stole the ball from DJ Augustine and was fouled on his way to the basket. And he made both free throws to give the Kings a lead they wouldn't relinquish. Cousins preserved the win by stripping the ball away from Darrell Arthur in the final seconds. And this game marked the 53rd game in Cousins' career where he had at least 30 points. Rudy Gay as well had 16 points, 10 rebounds, and 3 of Sacramento's 12 block shots. As well as when you look at the Nuggets, they had 8 players who scored in double figures, but they lost their 4th game in 5 games. Their 4th loss in 5 games. Will Barton had 14 of his 18 points in the 4th quarter. Danilo Gallinari had 17 points. But the game was all about DeMarcus Cousins leading the team from behind. After blowing the lead, he was able to rally the team. And again, this guy's a big-time player. I mean, when he's focused and doing his thing, he's unstoppable. 39 points for the game, and big win for Sacramento. Next, we have Houston losing overtime to Utah, 117 to 114. Gordon Hayward scored 28 points as the Jazz beat the Rockets in overtime 117-114. The Jazz was led by Gordon Hayward with 28 points. And now, when you look at these two teams, they're trying to keep pace for that 8th spot in the Western Conference. That's why this game was so huge, because with this loss, the win gave the Jazz the 8th place in the Western Conference and a half game ahead of the Rockets. So the first tiebreaker for a 2-way tie is head-to-head winning percentage. Houston fell to 2-1 against Utah. Now Houston is 28-29, as well as Utah is 28-28 this season. So it was a playoff atmosphere kind of game, and you saw that in this ball game, because it's a great game, that led to overtime, and the Jazz were able to hold off the Rockets and win by 3 points, 117-114. Meanwhile, Houston had James Harden, who had 42 points. Jason Terry hit a three-pointer with 10.8 seconds remaining to tie it at 106 to force overtime. Harden had his 8th 40-point game, tying Stephen Curry. The details of this game is, let's see. Checking, looking. Anyway, it says Hood hit a 3 over Dwight Howard with 51.9 seconds left in overtime to give the Jazz a 115-112 lead. Harden followed with the layup, but Derek Favors putback pushed the margin to 117-114 with 11.8 seconds to go. Favors finished with 19 points, 12 rebounds, and 3 blocks. Howard had 13 points and 16 rebounds. Hayward, like I said, had 28 points on just 7 shots from the field, making 6. He was 3 of 4 on 3-pointers and 13 for 15 at the foul line. But this was a very important game in the NBA for these two teams trying to fight for a playoff spot, that 8th spot in the Western Conference. So big win for the Utah Jazz, doing their thing, trying to get into the playoffs. They are now 28-28, and now Houston is 28-29. They will meet one more time this season. It looks like on March the 23rd. That's a story on the Houston Rockets and Utah Jazz game from last night. And the last game from last night was between the Portland Trailblazers and the Brooklyn Nets. And Portland continues to play good basketball. They won 112-104, led by a very underrated backcourt in CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard. I mean, this was their sixth straight win for Portland. And this is amazing because they don't have Nicholas Batum. I don't think he's with the Trailblazers. Obviously, their biggest loss in the offseason was LaMarcus Aldridge going to San Antonio. So that's what made this game interesting with the sixth straight win. But most importantly, the way they are playing. Despite not having Aldridge, they still got a chance to make it to the playoffs. So this was their season high, sixth consecutive victory. CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard each scored 34 points in the backcourt, and that's something special. You rarely see two players in the same backcourt score the same amount of points in a basketball game in the NBA. And you saw that last night. Brooklyn was competitive in this game, despite the 34 points that were scored each by CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard. Here's another stat. Lillard became the first player to score at least 30 points in 5 straight games for Portland since Jeff Petrie in the franchise's inaugural 1970-1971 season, and the first NBA player to do so this season. McCollum, by the way, added 6 assists with 5 rebounds and cracked the 30-point mark in back-to-back games for the first time in his career. Think about that. I mean, these two guys, McCollum and Lillard, are so prolific. They might be one of the most underrated backcourts in the league. They combined for 68 points, 68 between each other in the backcourt. I mean, you're definitely going to have a chance to win the ball game. As for the Brooklyn Nets, Brook Lopez had 36 points, 10 boards for Brooklyn. Joe Johnson had 19 points and 8 rebounds. Donald Sloan scored 14 points. So, but it was all for naught. They just could not compete with that backcourt that Portland has, man. They got a great backcourt. They combined for 68 points, 34 points apiece. When you do that from your own backcourt, you're definitely going to win. You're going to win the game. So McCollum made, so far when you look at his contribution in the starting lineup, he has made the most of the opportunity. He averaged 6.8 points in 15.7 minutes in 62 games. 3 of them starts. Now entering the Tuesday, McCollum had up those averages this season to 20.9 and 35.0 in 54 games, which is all starts. So when you look at McCollum and Lillard, and it just brings something, a dimension to the table that defenses can't stop. I think it'd be a very potential dangerous team going to the playoffs. Not saying they're going to win a championship by any means. They're not going to do that. But they do have a chance to be like a dark horse in the Western Conference playoffs because these two guys in the backcourt are just so dominant right now. They're so prolific. Scoring 68 total points in the backfield, man. Gets no better than that. So that's the story on Portland. Their 6th straight win. They are red hot right now. Interesting to see what they do now because right now Portland has won. Their win was for the 11th time in 12 games and 15 out of the last 18 to move into a tie with Dallas for the 6th seed in the Western Conference. So we'll see what happens in the playoffs. If Portland gets there, keep doing their thing, they'll be dangerous. So that is the end of the NBA recap. This is Rashad Mitchell on the Rashad Mitchell Show. I've just analyzed the 5 games that were played last night. wasn't that many games on last night. 5 games. Tonight it's 10 games. Tonight, February 24th. You got some interesting matchups tonight. You got I think the game that stands out to me without question is obviously Golden State and Miami. Miami is 32-24. Golden State is 50-5. To me, that's the most interesting game. Oh yes, definitely OKC. Oklahoma City plays Dallas. That's basically it to me. That's the most interesting games that stand out. Maybe Sacramento, San Antonio, but the 2 games that stand out to me is OKC and Dallas, and without question, Golden State, Miami. Golden State trying to keep that streak going, trying to make it 70 wins. If they can do it, they got 50 wins already. Definitely close to making it to the playoffs. So that recaps the NBA recap. Now I'm going to make my transition to the book that I've been discussing on the last few episodes, the top 60 NFL players in the last 60 years. I'm at number 20 right now. Steve Silverman wrote a great book that I bought several years ago, and I just wanted to discuss it. Here we go. Number 20, he had Dan Marino on the list. Now, you look at Dan Marino, his career speaks for itself. No quarterback has ever threw the ball or thrown the football with more velocity than Dan Marino. And he had an absolute gun for an arm. I mean, he could just thread the needle. He had such a quick release, tremendous arm strength, kind of reminiscent of Joe Namath. But he did his thing. He came out of the 83 class in 1983, drafted 27th overall. He was actually the last of the 6 quarterbacks that were chosen in the 1983 draft, which is a legendary class. When you have Dan Marino, a guy like Jim Kelly, Tony Eason, Todd Blackledge, the list goes on and on. Obviously, his best season of his career was in 1984. 48 touchdowns he threw in 1984. He threw for a league 5,084 passing yards, including 48 touchdowns. He shattered the record that was set by George Blanda and Y.A. Tittle. They had 36. They went to the Super Bowl and played the 49ers, and they obviously lost to the 49ers, which was a great team. They was 15-1 at the time, 38-16. But at the same time, this matchup between Marino and Joe Montana was probably the most glamorous matchup between 2 quarterbacks. It was so highly anticipated at the time, but it was a one-sided event at that time. Dan Marino threw 400 yards 13 times. That's how great this guy was, man. 13 times he threw for 400 yards in his career. 13 400-yard games as a quarterback. I mean, that's amazing. Overall, Dan Marino threw for 420 touchdowns. But anyway, 420 touchdowns. 420 career touchdowns. He won 147 games, threw for 61,361 yards. He was a great player. I mean, self-explanatory. It's not his fault that he did not win a Super Bowl. He just didn't have a running game. Next, Gale Sayers, a guy that once said, give me 6 inches of daylight. That's all I need. It's that famous footage that they show him saying, give me 6 inches of daylight. That's all I need. And that's what he always needed as a running back. His career was cut short, unfortunately. He began his career in 1965, was done by the 1971 season due to knee injuries. But this guy, for a short period of time, was one of the remarkable running backs in terms of his elusiveness and talent. The ability to just stop on a dime and cut back on people, man. He was just that guy, man. When he was in the open field coming out of Kansas and what he did with the Chicago Bears. Excuse me. Let me correct myself. He didn't say give me 6 inches of daylight. He said give me 18 inches of daylight. That's all I need. Without a smile on his face. That's explain what needed. That's why he was so successful in the open field, because he needed 18 inches of daylight, not 6 inches of daylight. Beg your pardon. But what stood out with him is that he scored 6 touchdowns as a rookie in a game against the San Francisco 49ers on December 12, 1965. He had 336 all-purpose yards as the Bears won 61-20. This mark had tied Ernie Nevers of the Chicago Cardinals in 1929 when he scored 6 touchdowns. Now, what's remarkable and impressive about this performance by Gale Sayers is that because it came on a field that was very miserable in terms of the conditions. It was the rain made it a bad condition type of football game. So most of the players were slipping and sliding, and that made it difficult for Sayers to be tackled. But Sayers was so comfortable, he was able to score on a 21-yard touchdown, a 7-yard touchdown, a 50-yard touchdown, a 1-yard touchdown, 80-yard reception, on a screen pass, 85-yard punt return. So that's the way it is, man. This Gale Sayers was a dominant performer. He played behind an average offensive line. Well, the offensive line that he played behind was not that wonderful, and he scored 22 total touchdowns as a rookie. He just did his thing, man. He had that ability to start, to get to full speed, stop, and cut in a heartbeat. That's what made him so amazing. So similar to Barry Sanders in a sense, but he had his own style, his own unique talent. And it's unfortunate that his career was cut short because of injuries. That happens, but hey, you can't predict what's going to happen. He still was a great player, and that's all that matters. So Gale Sayers is at number 19, where Steve Silverman had on the list at number 18. Next at number 18. Matter of fact, I'm going to take a break right now. This is the Rashad Mitchell Show for Wednesday, February the 24th. Be right back. Welcome back to the Rashad Mitchell Show on Spreaker.com. I am your host, Rashad Mitchell, talking about the top 60 NFL players in the last 60 years. We resume with the countdown. Number 18, Earl Campbell. And he was a guy that was a big physical specimen, known as the Tyler Rose. Played 8 seasons. Just wore defensive players down, man. He was so hard to tackle, and that's what stood out with him. There was a lot of games that stood out with him that made him so great as a running back. I think the game that stood out to me is the game against the Miami Dolphins on Monday Night Football, where he put on an excellent performance against a great excellent Dolphin team at that time. 1978 rookie year. Houston won 35-30, and Campbell rushed for 199 yards and 4 touchdowns. And the one that stood out that has that indelible moment was when he ran 81 yards down the far sidelines with Curtis Johnson, the cornerback of the Dolphins, in pursuit. Johnson chased Campbell for the last 30 yards of the run, but he could not catch him. And Campbell was not the fastest guy, but he was just hard to deal with. So he came, 1 yard away from 200 yards. Now, his style was all about hard work, inflicting punishment on those who attempted to tackle him. He was a power back. He had fine, straight-ahead speed, and he could outrace the defense. It wasn't fleet of foot, but he could just outrun people. Anyway, he led the league led the NFL in rushing yards his first 3 seasons. As a rookie, he made his mark by rushing for 1,450 yards and 13 touchdowns while averaging 4.8 yards per carry. Then he ran for 1,697 yards and 19 touchdowns in his second year, which is incredible. And then he had 1,934 yards and 13 touchdowns while averaging 5.2 yards per carry in his third season. This yardage total was the second highest in NFL history at the time, was just 69 yards behind O.J. Simpson. Campbell was nearly unstoppable as he put 4 200-yard rushing games on the board and continued to overpower defensive players. And he had those great forearms that made him great too. Another thing that's kind of underrated about Earl Campbell that he won 2 league MVPs in 1978 and 1979. And he was a 3-time Offensive Player of the Year 3 straight years in a row from 1978 to 1980, and a 5-time All-Pro selection. He never ran out of bounds when he had the opportunity. He seemed to just look for contact. Even the Pittsburgh Steelers respected him. When they played up against Campbell. And there was a quote from Mel Blount when he said, "I was never afraid to tackle anyone, and I enjoyed it when I had the chance to stick someone. But it was a different story with Campbell. That was a very dangerous man. He inflicted a lot of punishment and a lot of pain. I did what I could against him, but it was always a chore, and always difficult. Tackling him was like taking a punch from Joe Frazier." Overall, Campbell had a great career. He didn't play that many seasons. He finished his career with 1984 with the Saints, and he's a great player, great running back. And another thing too that stands out again, he had 4 200-yard rushing games in a season in 1980. So he played 9 seasons, and he could have had more yardage in his career. He finished with 9,407 rushing yards, 81 touchdowns. He could have did more if he didn't have an injury shortened career. But he's still one of the greats. Tyler Rose, Earl Campbell. Once again, this is the Rashad Mitchell Show for Wednesday. Number 17, John Elway. Another guy that was part of that legendary 83 class of 1983 of the great quarterbacks. Now, Elway's claim to fame was that he was one of the masters of the fourth quarter comeback. Obviously, he was a remarkable talent. Could have played any sport. He was a great athlete. He had more arm strength than any quarterback, maybe except Dan Marino. He had a great ability to make plays, to keep plays alive. I mean, he was a great player. He won a couple of Super Bowls, obviously because of one and only Terrell Davis. But he came out of Stanford. He did his thing. He did not disappoint in the NFL. Only thing that was disappointing, obviously, is that he lost a few times in the Super Bowl, where it was to the Giants, the Redskins, and the 49ers, respectively. And the thing is that he just needed a running back to fill that void, to take the pressure off. And I think that's what made him get over that hump to become a Super Bowl champion, the last 2 seasons of his career. But the thing that stands out is the drive against the Cleveland Browns, because the Browns was leading 20-13. The scenario was like this late in the fourth quarter. The ball is at their own 2-yard line. after a botched kickoff return, and Elway just did his thing. He just came through like a great quarterback supposed to in the clutch, in the dog pound in Cleveland at that Municipal Stadium. I think it was Cleveland Municipal Stadium. I think that was the name of the stadium that they played at. That was in the AFC Championship game, and the Municipal Stadium. And that dog pound, man, being so loud, and he just did his thing. He threw a touchdown to Mark Jackson to tie it. So in overtime, and they won in overtime. Rich Carter's field goal that cemented, Elway as a clutch quarterback with that clutch gene, and I think that he showed that on that drive. Even though at that time he wasn't winning any Super Bowls, but he was able to do his thing and make it happen. He won 2 Super Bowls as a Denver Bronco against the Green Bay Packers and the Atlanta Falcons. A 9-time Pro Bowler, a 6-time Pro Bowl starter, a league MVP, 1 time, and a 1-time Super Bowl MVP. In Super Bowl 33, 12 seasons, he had 3,000 or more yards passing, 4,123 yards completed. He threw 300 touchdown passes. He threw for 51,475 yards in his career, and he scored 32 rushing touchdowns, and he had 47 game-tying or game-winning drives in the fourth quarter. So that was John Elway in a nutshell. Next, I'm going to number 16. I don't think I'm going to finish this list, maybe tomorrow or Friday, but we're going to keep moving. Mean Joe Green of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, this guy definitely made Pittsburgh become a great football team when he came to Pittsburgh. He was that catalyst. He obviously was a dynamic pass rusher, defensive lineman to ever play the game. He's a great player. But he turned around that franchise more than anybody that came through that time, because that defense, man, 4 Hall of Famers, came out of North Texas State. He was drafted in 1969. But things got turned around for the better. And he had the instincts. He was one of those first defensive tackles to tilt or play at an angle instead of just lining up with his shoulders opposite of his opponents. So he lived in the center, guarded gap, and his opponents never knew where he was going to attack. So he was just a great defensive lineman, man. He dominated. He had an interception in the first Super Bowl that he played in when they beat the Vikings 16-6. A forced fumble, a fumble recovery, and that defense did not give up an offensive touchdown. In 1976, he was part of a defense, despite winning 2 Super Bowls in a row in 75 and 74. In 76, they had 5 shutouts. They held 9 of their opponents to single digits. And unfortunately, they lost to the Raiders 24-7. But according to Mean Joe Green, he felt that the 1976 defense is the defense that stood out to him, because he said, that they got off to a terrible start, which they did. They lost 4 of their first 5 games, and then they began to shut down the run to the point where teams didn't want to try to run against them. They stopped the passing game. Every unit on the defense worked in sync. And he also said when you have 5 shutouts, you are doing your job. And in some of those games, teams were lucky to get 2 or 3 first downs. So this guy, again, Mean Joe Green did his thing. He was a great defensive lineman to ever play the game. But he was the catalyst. He was that guy that turned the franchise around with his presence. He had 66 unofficial sacks, and played on that steel curtain defense, man. That front four is what made them the steel curtain, with the white, Ernie Fats Holmes, and L.C. Greenwood and Green. That was the steel curtain, not the linebackers, not the secondary. Yes, they were part of the steel curtain, but the steel curtain wouldn't have been the steel curtain when it wasn't for that front four led by Joe Green. Okay, let's go to number 15. Anthony Munoz is number 15. Great offensive lineman. Played for the Cincinnati Bengals. Started in 1980. He's definitely a great offensive lineman. He played left tackle, and when he did, he opened up holes for the running game. 11 times he was chosen to the Pro Bowl, a 9-time All-Pro. Munoz had led Cincinnati to having like the most productive running game in the league for a 4-year stretch from 1986 to 1989. He was a student of the game, had tap dancer's feet, and he could sprint when he had to in order to make a block on the corner. But what made him superior was his ability to change direction without losing his balance. So self-explanatory with this guy. I mean, he was great as on condition, had an edge in knowledge and technique. He could do it all. I mean, this guy was great at pass blocking and run blocking. So Anthony Munoz was a great player. Number 14, another player on the defensive line that made a difference for the Dallas Cowboys, Bob Lilly. Bob Lilly was a great defensive tackle. Did his thing, just like Mean Joe Green. Just made it happen. That flex defense is where he made his mark. Playing on that defensive line where he flourished at that defensive line position. I don't think he played defensive tackle, he played defensive end. His first 3 seasons he played defensive end. I don't know if he played defensive tackle, but he did play defensive line. But anyway, he was a 11-time Pro Bowl selection, a 7-time All-NFL first team selection. He had 94 and a half unofficial sacks in his career. And one of the famous sacks that he had was in Super Bowl history when he sacked Miami Dolphins quarterback Bob Greasy for a 29-yard loss for a sack in Super Bowl VI, which the Cowboys would win 24-3. And he was up there with Joe Green and Merlin Olsen in terms of defensive linemen, because Green had the quickness and the speed to Lilly, and Olsen was prepared and strong as Lilly. But what Lilly had, what Olsen and Green didn't have, was being able to be consistent. Lilly played in 196 consecutive games, and he had the strength too, as well. So Bob Lee is probably there's a reason why he's higher than Joe Green. He did his thing. It is what it is. So that's Bob Lilly for you for number 14. Let's move on to number 13. Ronnie Lott. No question. This guy was a hard hitter, one of the hardest hitters in the secondary at the safety position to ever play the game. And when you look at San Francisco, they're always going to talk about Joe Montana, talk about Bill Walsh, talk about the West Coast offense. But what's overlooked is the defense of the 49ers. They kind of like overlooked because they've always been looked at as a finesse team. And that's all that matters at that time to most observers. But this Ronnie Lott, who started his career as a cornerback, definitely was a guy who was an enforcer in that secondary. He just get hit like a flying missile. And he brought that toughness to the 49ers, no question about it, for the defensive standpoint, and especially from a team standpoint. He's a devastating hitter. He had 63 interceptions in his career. He led the league in interceptions in 1986 and 1991. 5 of his interceptions were returned for touchdowns. He had 1,113 tackles, plus 8.5 sacks during his 14-year career. A 10-time Pro Bowler, 6-time All-Pro selection. He had caused 16 fumbles and recovered 17 fumbles. So this guy was a total package, man. This guy could sack the quarterback, hit people, and get interceptions, man. This guy was no joke. Ronnie Lott. Plus, he won 4 Super Bowls. So his impact, without question, is underrated because, again, defense was not overshadowing the offense. The offense of the 49ers with the West Coast offense overshadowed what Ronnie Lott did for that defense. So that's Ronnie Lott for you. Number 12, Steve Silverman had Tom Brady at number 12. Now you look at Tom Brady, he is maybe the greatest quarterback ever. This guy has won 4 Super Bowls. He's been to 6 of them. And he's been able to currently take his team to 5 consecutive AFC Championship games, possibly a 6th next season. The thing standing out with Brady is the evolution of his career. Because when you look at earlier his career, even when he was winning championships, he was not putting up gaudy numbers. But when he got involved with Randy Moss, had his best season he ever had. He threw 50 touchdowns and 8 interceptions in 2007, including 4,806 yards. And in the playoffs against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he completed 26 out of 28 passing. That's so efficient, man. That is on the top level you're ever going to see. It is what it is with Brady, man. Brady's been a great quarterback. He's played great in big spots and made things happen as a quarterback. So Tom Brady of the Patriots is number 12, 4-time Super Bowl champion. His resume speaks for itself. You're almost close to the end. Lastly, I'm going to get one guy in before I conclude this broadcast. Barry Sanders was number 11. Was a throwback. Did not play for self-promotion, endorsements, or publicity. Just played the game the right way. Barry Sanders was, to me, a highlight film. He was like Dominique Wilkins, man. You never knew what he was going to do when he had the ball in his hands. Quickly, in 1997, he had 14 games of at least 100 yards rushing in 1997, which was the most ever in a single season. He had 76 100-yard games in his career. He scored 109 career touchdowns, and he rushed for at least 1,100 yards in every season he played. So it's self-explanatory with Barry Sanders. He's a great player, and that's all I got to say about that. As I conclude this broadcast, this is the Rashad Mitchell Show. I'm running out of time. Until then, talk to you tomorrow on the Rashad Mitchell Show. Check me out on Facebook, Rashad Mitchell's Books, if you want to buy a book. This is Rashad Mitchell on the Rashad Mitchell Show on Spreaker. Peace. God bless.